Hi everyone, welcome to this episode in our Explorer series. I'm John Barclay and joining me today is leadership coach Donna Buchanan.
Hi everyone.
Today we'll be looking at the 4 intentional states and focusing in on interconnectedness. Donna, tell us about the ISA 360, which has the 4 intentional states in it and why we created a tool.
It's a leadership assessment of the 4 capability areas that we believe are required for awesome safety performance. And it came about through some work from the founders of Data Drives Insight. They spent a lot of time on the other side of safety, if you like, knocking on doors, letting family members know that loved ones had been injured pretty badly or were not coming home. And so there's a really strong desire to create something that enabled them to prevent having to do that. So how can we prevent injury, prevent harm? And so that led them on a journey of discovering what's different, what's missing. We discovered the greatest lever for change is in leadership and in culture.
Right, excellent. And when we look at the ISA 360 tool, why is it a 360 tool? What's that process?
Yeah, so 360 is a really important part. It basically means we're getting feedback not just from ourselves and where we think we're at in our leadership capability, but from the people around us, the people who we work with, so our direct manager, our peers and our direct reports. So we're getting an opportunity to get feedback around where they think we are right now and where they would like us to be in 12 months' time. So it gives us an opportunity to focus on growth areas.
And how did we come to the 4 practices or the 4 intentional states? How did we get to those 4?
Yeah, that was a bit of a journey. So we initially started with 7 leadership capabilities that were derived from a white paper written by Rick Stricker. And we developed a survey based on those 7. And after doing a number of surveys, doing lots of research, validation and reliability testing, we discovered there was actually 4 core capabilities. So while the 7 are still present, there are actually 4 high-level capabilities and some subdomains, if you like, in those.
Right. So it was about looking into the impact of those 7 practices and which ones had the biggest impact, and they came together as those 4.
Yeah, essentially those 4 were the highest correlated to safety leadership impact.
Right. So on that then, what are those 4 intentional states?
So the first one is commitment, and commitment has 2 elements to it. It's not only how committed am I to safety, to mine and to others, but how well do I engage others in commitment to safety? So it's kind of got 2 elements to it, not just me and my thinking, but getting others to engage in a more safe, more productive way of being. Then there is curiosity. So curiosity is all about a learning mindset. We ask lots of questions. We keep our ear to the ground to understand what's going on at all levels of the business. When we see problems or opportunities, we ask lots of questions and we seek out the people who have the information to do it. Yeah. So it's kind of like a superpower, if you like, that curiosity.
And that was the thing I liked about the definition of that. It's a learning mindset rather than just a problem identification process. It was actually being purely curious about what's happening and what we can do to learn.
Yeah, it's about seeking perspectives. We might know something ourselves about that situation and other people know things as well and might have information to help make something more safe. So it's about seeking those perspectives.
And what are the other 2?
So the third one is caring actively, and it's a deliberate choice of words about caring actively. It's the act of caring. So it's not only what do I think and feel, but then what do I do about that? So if I care about your safety, what will I do as a result of that caring? How do I act on that level of care? Yeah. And the final one, which we're talking about today, is interconnectedness. And that's about how do I translate that commitment, that curiosity, that caring into the way we do things around here. How do we improve our ability to see risk and mitigate risk? How do we improve the processes and systems around us? How do we make sure we have overlapping layers of protection, those sorts of things.
Great. So the 4 intentional states being commitment, curiosity, caring actively and interconnectedness. So For those who'd like to know more about those other intentional states, you can go back to some of our other previous Explorer series videos where we've gone into a lot more detail around each of those intentional states, and today we'll talk a bit more about interconnectedness. So tell us a bit more about interconnectedness.
Yeah, for me there's two key parts to interconnectedness. There's the integral model, which is about understanding that in any given moment there are things at play that are visible and are invisible. Yeah. The invisible elements are the beliefs and values that we have as individuals and as organisations or teams. Yeah. So what are my what are my beliefs about how to do things or what's important, and how does that play out in my actions? And the actions are the things that are visible to others. And that happens also at a team level or organisational level. So what are the collective beliefs of the team about how we do things around here or what's important? And how does that play out in the way we do things in the team, but also what systems and processes and rituals do we create as a result of those beliefs? Yeah. So that's a really important part of interconnectedness, understanding that all of that is connected and playing out in the workplace. Perfect, yeah. The other side of it is systems thinking. So systems thinking, again, is that idea that everything is connected. So if I'm going to influence for a more safe, more productive outcome, how do I influence the system? I'm part of the system, my team is part of the system, the IT, the finance team, the safety team, the production team, the environment we're in, we're all interconnected in some way. Yeah. And so a leader's ability to see and understand that to a degree and then influence it for a better outcome is what we're looking for in that interconnectedness intentional state.
Right, and for those who want to know a little bit more about the integral model and that interconnectedness part of that, again, we did a whole episode on the integral model as well, so that'll give you more detail around that process itself. So talk us through some of the attributes a leader does in the interconnectedness. How does that play out in a day-to-day role?
Yeah, so it's a couple of different things. It might be simple things like a leader noticing and reporting a hazard. So the leader is actually seeing risk and reporting that and advocating and influencing for change to make that better, whether that's in the moment or it might take longer. Yeah. So that's the sort of stuff that people notice. They see that happening and that has an impact on how they feel about that leader's safety leadership style. It is also about how they're influencing processes and systems around them. So, a lot of leaders will say, well, I don't really change policies or standards or procedures, and yet they have the ability to influence the broader business. So not am I improving things for my team, but I'm looking beyond my team and going, well, we do this here, I wonder who else does it this way and who could be more safe as a result of the learning that we've had. So I'm going to share learnings across the business, not just have them in my team.
So it may not necessarily be able to directly change the procedure or the policy, but recognising I have an input to that. Like I've actually seen it, I use it every day, so how do I actually have that input to that system, that procedure, that policy?
Yeah, exactly.
And I like the one too about the hazard ID, because we generally project that's the external bit, we generally put that on, everyone's expected to raise hazards. But that's the leader's interconnectedness to the system as well, is they're a part of that system, so they need to be doing that part of that process as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so whether they're doing it themselves or ensuring that it happens is kind of recognising their role in the system rather than, I guess, like you say, having it at distance and it's happening around them.
Yeah. And is it just focused on procedures here, or is there a greater, because you talked about it being the integral model, which is internal and external as well as individual and collective. How does that play out in a cultural sense with the interconnectedness practice?
Yeah, so it is processes and systems and policies, and it's the way those are implemented, I guess, or played out in the workplace. So quite often we'll hear that, there's a way of doing something written down in a procedure, but the minute you go out in the field, they'll soon tell you that's not how we do it because it's not safe or it's not efficient. There's a quicker way of doing it. And so there's a disconnect between what's written down and what's actually happening. And
there's a lot of recent research around work imagined versus work done, which is what we're talking about there, isn't it? Is that actual understanding. This is how we write it, but this is actually how it's done because it's more efficient or even safer potentially.
This is where the curiosity, intentional state plays out as well. A leader has the opportunity to be really curious. How are you doing it? How are you staying more safe? What else could we be doing to be more safe? How could we make that the consistent way we do it so we have more success or less chance of risk playing out? And so simply asking those questions of the people who are doing the work enables interconnectedness to grow.
And then even connecting that into the actively caring, which is taking action on that, because we've had really good insight, we've learnt a lot, there's some really good learnings, actively caring on that by actually putting that into action.
Yeah, exactly. So moving it from that discussion into reality. Yeah. And again, understanding that if we're going to change behaviour, often a work instruction is, mildly useful. So often it's, people learn differently. They might learn through reading a work instruction, but they also might need to actually do the task in the new way. They might need some training, they might need some coaching. So to translate a process and a system into a new way of behaving or being, it takes more than a piece of paper. Yeah. So that's another element of the integral model is what do I need to do to make this the way we do things around here beyond updating a policy and process. It's part of it, but it's not the whole.
Yeah. So when we look at those 4 intentional states, my experience has been that when we engage leaders around those and actually start to experience and explore what they mean, commitment and curiosity and actively caring or caring actively seem to make the most obvious sense. We can make a really clear connection to that. But I always find the interconnectedness part becomes quite difficult for people to understand. So why do you think that is? Why is that the more difficult one for us to really understand my role in that?
Yeah, I think for a lot of leaders, it's about that idea of beyond me, beyond my team, and beyond my role scope, if you like. Yeah. So if I'm the supervisor of a team, it's not within my scope to change the finance policy that's going to help me be more safe. Yeah. And there's an element of truth in that, I guess. However, if we stopped there, then your impact as a safety leader is limited to that moment, to that thinking. So interconnectedness is about going, well, how could I influence this finance process to be more safe? Yeah. And that opens up that ability to go, well, who could I talk to? Who else has influence? Whose job is it? How would I need to engage them? And it enables the leader to expand their impact into areas they wouldn't traditionally think they have. So I've actually got an example from my colleague, actually Ash. He was doing some in-field coaching with essentially the CFO of a operations and maintenance business. And they were on site on a plant and having a conversation with the local supervisor there and the plant manager. The plant manager was, reflecting that there's no money for safety. So he and his team there was a belief that there's no money for safety. And they got that belief because when they used the process or the system to request funds, they did it the way they believed was the right way to do it, and it would always say no. Computer says no. Yeah. And so they would get frustrated and give up. And they had this belief that there was no money for safety. When they had that discussion with the finance manager, he was able to say, actually, that's not true. There is a way, there's always money for safety, and let me show you what options are available to you. And when he was able to walk them through the options, it completely changed their view of what's possible. So in that moment, the finance manager is having their ear to the ground, really understanding what's happening on the ground, because he was confused about why people thought there was no money, because he knew there was money. Yeah. And so now he had a better understanding of what the blocker was and what that belief was that was getting in the way. And the local guys started to see finance as an enabler to safety, not a blocker. Not a blocker. Yeah. So the interconnectedness between a local site and finance as a team, as a function, was expanded. The team's view of what's available had been expanded, and therefore what they could achieve from making the site more safe was infinitely more better.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of those examples too when you're out talking to people around just looking beyond my team and beyond my department even, And I think that's probably been the easiest way for me to help leaders understand what interconnectedness is about. Yes. Your team or your department is a part of a process, a part of a system, and it's how you're having those roles and how you're connecting to those. The recent one I've probably had was an example where a department manager was working really well and the team was performing really well in its own performance indicators, and quite rightly they were very excited about how they were performing and how they were going, but some of their KPIs or what they were doing internally obviously has influence over other parts of the stream of work, but it was actually making their downstream work, their upstream work a little bit more difficult and making their job a bit harder. But that was the opening for the leader to understand we were doing well with our commitments, we were curious about how we can improve and how we can move and improve as a team. They actively cared for each other and worked really well, but they were just missing a bit of that. So what does that do to others and how are we impacting the broader system and the broader process?
Yeah.
So when we look at those intentional states, we try to look at it also in the cultural maturity piece of the organisation as well. Yep. And for those who want to look at that in more detail, it's a past episode we've talked about culture maturity. So we talk about the reactive stage, the conforming stage, the achieving stage and the integral stage. Yep. What do you think's the significant change between a leader and an organisation getting into the achieving stage to making that step change to integral?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. What we've noticed about leaders is when they are low in curiosity and low in interconnectedness, it has an impact on culture. And the impact is in things like people feeling safe to speak up, or that it's worth speaking up when they have ideas on how to improve things or make things safer. That they're less engaged in the business and making things better. So growing curiosity and interconnectedness can have a significant impact on those things. And of course that's not just going to impact safety, that's going to impact productivity, efficiency, all sorts of things. Yeah. So growing those two particularly is something we've noticed in our research. And I think we've said before, the 4 intentional states kind of in a wheel, a nice round balanced wheel has a much more positive impact on culture and helps organisations shift into that more integral space. So a more holistic, balanced 4 intentional states for leaders is what will have a really positive impact.
Yeah. So really to get into those top areas of culture maturity, all those 4 intentional states are really important.
Yeah, they're interconnected.
They're interconnected, and hence why that last one we're talking about is interconnectedness. But again, I have found when you start looking at organisations to really make that significant step change between the achieving stage, where we're actually being very successful as individuals, even a little bit siloed potentially, yep, but still doing really well. There's a lot of people are speaking up, there's lots of problem solving going on, leaders are curious, they're actively caring, they're committed. It's really to make that broader organisational sense, that interconnectedness is that final sort of balance in that wheel, isn't it, that leaders need to understand?
Yeah, I think leaders and teams, it's that my team's going great, how can I make my organisation go great? Yeah. How can I extend my commitment, my caring, my curiosity to others in the organisation to have a positive impact?
Thanks Donna for joining us today and talking us through those 4 intentional states and interconnectedness. Hope everyone got a lot out of that, and if you want to know more about those 4 intentional states and the integral model that we spoke about as well, feel free to go have a look at some of our Explorer series. So thank you.